landing traces that are still there from that time period. So for me, somebody who is looking at locations, looking at the correct positions of things, within the case, to make sure I have an understanding of where all the players were and what actions occurred correctly and all that. For a case with a trace, and what I'm talking about are the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter from '55 and the Tuscumbia space penguins case out of Tuscumbia, Missouri, one that was investigated by Ted Phillips. Both of those cases still to this day have basically a flying saucer pattern still on the ground. Now you can say that, okay, maybe somebody made it, to match the location, or somebody, but I can assure you that the property owners of these properties do not have extensive knowledge of UFO cases in order to be able to know, where the objects were, let alone be able to maintain, evidence in a way, discoloration of vegetation, different growths, rates of growth of vegetation, all that's still prevalent, 50, 60 years later. For me, somebody who's evidence-based, I find those things the most interesting. The long cases that have long-term evidence that is still visible. And that's what I seek out more than anything, is to go to some of these cold cases, some of these historic cases, and document, but also, to see what's still there. When I go to these places, I do collect soil samples and other artifacts, if I can, whatever I can find there, because I think a lot of times, there's not really follow-up for some of these decade-old cases, I mean, some of these old cases will show up on a episode of a TV show on a network, but, are people going back there to reinvestigate and restudy and do, long-term scientific analysis, which I think is sorely needed. So I am fascinated by that, and those are a couple examples of UFO-wise what really intrigues me. Also, when you do go to a famous case or a famous spot, seeing the reality of the place versus what Hollywood has done with a place, or a story, it can be, mind-altering in its revelations. Because a lot of times Hollywood gets it wrong, TV gets it wrong, just the locations, just the way things look, just the way things fit into, certain places. They do a horrible job.
And they also hype it up, too. And the reason why I mention that, that movie was made about Travis Walton. One of the actors, supporting actors on it, was one of my dad's good friends from Korea, James Gardner. And he played a big part in that show. And he said, even because, getting to know a little bit of Travis Walton and all that stuff, he said the story, because I know him and my dad were talking about it at one point. He said that they changed it around, not to enhance it to make a movie, I guess. But they did enhance it quite a bit. So, I mean, when you see stuff like this of Hollywood, even the Travel Channel or any of those other cable channels, that they're going to enhance it because they want viewers to watch.
Yeah, and I've been sort of critical of Hollywood and fellow researchers for, in engaging in that sort of thing. You know, a lot of times they'll be like, okay, well, you know, it's getting the story forward, it's getting it out there, you know, it's teaching a whole new generation of people or whatever. But for me, you don't need to sensationalize it. It's already so sensational. You know what I'm saying? It's already a fantastical thing. You don't need to sensationalize it even more. Yeah, with Fire in the Sky, I think generally it was done pretty well until they got into inside of the UFO. Then it just got, you know, silly. It's not what occurred, you know. And you have a lot of shows out now like Project Blue Book, which you know, is supposedly based on Project Blue Book, but it's nowhere bears any resemblance to anything that happened in Blue Book. And all the cases that they reference are totally mixed up, messed up, done out of order. Some stuff Blue Book wasn't involved with, you know. And I understand that, you know, it's dramatic, but it's also on the History Channel. And I think, you know, yeah, our channels really don't reflect what they're supposed to be doing anymore. But, you know, I think if something's on History Channel, it should be historically accurate. And I don't think you need to surrender. This is my opinion. You don't need to surrender the facts to the drama. You know, if you go back and you look at that, the UFO incident, you know, the made-for-TV movie that was done on the Betty and Barney Hill case back in the 70s, that was a good dramatization of what allegedly occurred. And they didn't have to really change anything. And it was one of the highest viewed made-for-television movies of that time period. Problem is, you know, Hollywood tends to overproduce stuff now. And you tend to have teams of producers, sometimes dozens of them, that get a show and they have no basis or knowledge as to what the show is, so they have to do this formula sort of thing, you know. I think it's really unfortunate. I have dipped my feet into some of the TV stuff, you know, with the intent of trying to influence it to where we get an accurate history. There's really no reason to sensationalize. There's really no reason to alter the facts. You know, I think the more close in tune you are with the facts, with the locations, the environment, what was actually going on, the more intriguing the case is. You know, I'm not interested in, you know, like the Pascagoula case because it had flashy aliens with robot claws, you know, instead of in front of some big blue, silvery, you know, the visuals are intriguing, but what makes that intriguing is picturing it in your head being experienced by two men there at that spot, you know, and it's not a TV show and it's not a movie. This is a real event, you know, and I think a lot of times we forget that, and I think it's very lazy. I think documentaries and not everybody's. There's some people that really do their research out there now, but I think a lot of that stuff is lazy, and I think it's why it's so, like you said, so quickly produced now is because it's a lot of it's just phoning it in, you know, and eventually the ball's going to drop, I think, or the floor's going to drop out from under it because, you know, you can only regurgitate the same thing over and over so many different ways until you're going to have to get to some real meat, you know.
No, I think you're so right. You know, for years, it was cowboy shows. Then from cowboy shows, it went on to army shows. And then from army shows, it went into police shows and detective shows. And then it went into, how can I say it, Petticoat Junction and all that type of shows. And now, for the longest period of time, it's about UFOs and space and aliens and us living out there. But the point is, people, you know, are starting to accept it and more. But what I do is I sit there and think of the people that actually were abducted, what they're emotionally going through every day of their life. Every night they go to bed, Are they worried about, are they going to be abducted again? You know, I have checked, and we even had a guest on the show who pretty much came up with the same type of numbers I did. The amount of people that go missing in our country every year. I'm not talking about murders. I'm not talking about, you know, being kidnapped or taken away, you know, from a wife or husband and taken away. People are vanishing, not just in the forest, you know, in the national parks, disappearing like, was it 30 to 50,000 a year in our country alone? Then you look at what's happening in Canada and France and the UK, the reporting people being vanishing. Something is going on out there. And it's about time. I think the government needs to come out and not dilly-dally around like they are doing. Yes, they came out with, you know, the Navy saying that, yeah, UFOs are real, but we don't know where they're coming from. Now you got this thing with this other guy who's teamed up with the Army that are going to try to find evidence, or not evidence, but material from UFOs where they can back engineer it, supposedly. It's stuff is coming out more and more, but I think it's time that we know what actually is going on. Seriously, is there a threat? Because if people are being abducted against their wishes, if people are being taken away and never returned, I mean, there's like Mary Joyce in North Cashiers, Carolina. She runs a group. She has one of the oldest reporting centers on the internet for UFO reporting and Bigfoot and stuff like that. She's been on my show, and, you know, her history background, she was an editor, she was a reporter for various newspapers through the years. She knows her stuff, and she claims that she had a government official with high clearance come up one time and say, yes, that we are working with aliens and they're sharing technology. In exchange, we're turning our heads and allowing a certain amount of people disappearing. Is this where this 30 to 50,000 people are vanishing every year?
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's it. Yeah. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say that's a lot, and you know that takes up space. So where are they all going? You can't put them all in one corner somewhere. Are they using us just for experiments, or are we food? Or I mean, it makes you think.
Well, she claims that the official said food. You know, they like humans for consumption, but who knows? Hey, we're almost out of our time here, and you know the time goes so fast when you're on, Michael. But I got to ask you again, why don't you share your blog where people can find you on the internet?
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook under Michael Huntington, Instagram under Huntington Strange Travels, the same thing under Tumblr, Twitter, Flipboard. I also have my WordPress site, Huntington Strange Travels. But, you know, like I said, just Google Michael Huntington and then whatever weirdness you're into, and something will come up of interest. I'm usually pretty active on social media. So if anybody wants to, you know, message me or talk to me or whatever, I'm usually pretty readily available. I also do attend a lot of different conferences and do a lot of other radio shows out there as well. So, yeah, just keep an eye out. Hopefully I'll get some of those books out next year. And thanks for listening.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, it's always fun on there. Now, we're also going to a new format starting November 15th. We're going to a 4-hour format. We're going to come on at 5 o'clock Pacific West Coast time to 9 o'clock West Coast time. So that puts us, from 8 to midnight Eastern time. I would like to get you back on, if possible, towards the end of November to talk about cryptics and strange ghostly things like, you know, black-eyed children, Mothman, Thunderbird, and stuff like that, if you'd like to come on.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll see. I'll check my schedule, and we'll see if we can't work something out. That'd be great.
Okay, great. Well, you have a great week, and thank you again for coming on Night Dreams.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. You take care.
See you. Bye-bye.
Well, James, we're going to go on break, and then when we're back, we're going to have Sam. We're going to be talking recap of what we talked about here tonight on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. Check out our website at www.nighttdreams.com. nightdreamstalkradio.com.